Hi, so I'm going to present this time another episode of the Corner Booth, and this time I'm going to be talking. We're going to be talking to Dan Haskett. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist in the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 20 years now, and I'm here to inspire you. And one of the things that I did, and we may continue to do so, and update more, is these podcasts that were called the Corner Booth, where we would get together and talk about animation as well as interview industry professionals, and that we know, and some that we didn't. And this time around, we were talking to a friend of Larry's, Dan Haskett, who, if you work within the animation industry, you come across his work a lot. He's worked on just about everything, and his art is some of the art that I was exposed to almost immediately once I started working in the industry. And he's just absolutely amazing. So you're going to hear Larry and I speak with him, and we get really kind of philosophical but there's a lot of advice on becoming an artist and the drive that it takes to be an artist in the industry. And we talked to him about where he came from, what he did, how he got into the industry himself, and a lot of different things. It's a really interesting interview, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm really upset that we hadn't put it out sooner. One of the things that you're going to notice is that, unlike the Swinton Scott video, that I did a lot of photos on screen for, this time around I don't do that, and in part because it just took forever to do that. And I think that from now on I'm not going to necessarily put a lot of images about what we're talking about or anything like that. I'm just going to leave the audio so you could listen to it and concentrate more on what is being said instead of whatever is visually put on the video. So without any further ado, here's the interview with Dan Haskett. Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Corner Booth. We're here at the Buchanan Arms. I'm Luis Escobar. I'm here with
Larry Whitaker.
And today we're going to be talking to Dan Haskett. Now, Larry, you know Dan a little bit more. Do you want to introduce him?
Well, I can as soon as I finish swallowing this.
I totally caught him with a big old, right after he had a big bite of his...
Dan Haskett and I first met in during Tiny Toons, and I won't say what year. You guys can Internet Movie Database that to find out. I had been in the business for about a month, and I saw these gorgeous drawings, and I had to go find out how to draw that way. So I sought out Dan Haskett, and he was the artist who'd done them, and that's honestly how it started. And I can tell you briefly why. This will be quick. When I was a kid, my dad said, always listen to people who are more experienced than you. Notice I did not say older. And listen to what they have to say. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Haskett, who just took a bite of food too.
One of the very first artwork that I was introduced to when I first started as an intern at Film Roman was your work, because it was a show. I don't know if it ever got off the ground, and I wish I had the sketchbook, because I carried that artwork around forever. I saw it at the copy machine, and I made a photocopy of your work, and I'm like, this is awesome. This is incredible work, and I had it in my sketchbook forever, and I still have it in my old sketchbook.
But not in your portfolio.
Well, maybe.
Because I know for a fact that has happened to Dan.
No, it wasn't. I didn't do that. But
Indeed,
no,
it has, yeah.
But I had it in my sketchbook as inspiration for a long time. So it's actually a really big honor to meet you, because you're one of the biggest. You were the first really high caliber, influential artists whose work I saw at a studio, which totally blew me away.
Well,
So,
thank you. Thanks very much.
so when did you start?
Well, let's see. I started professionally in 1969, just out of high school.
Oh, right out of high
And
school.
yeah, and I just want to give a little mention to that school. It was the High School of Art and Design in New York City.
Okay.
And it was one of a group of specialized high schools that they now call them the Fame schools after that movie, because the High School of Performing Arts was called the Fame School. And the schools have names like Aviation and Bronx High School of Science, and at that time Music and Art and Design. And Art and Design was really a commercial art school. So we had majors like, besides cartooning and animation, we also had advertising art and illustration and theater design and fashion design. So,
Wow.
yeah, very, very lucky to have come out of there.
Yeah, that's amazing. How'd you get into the school? Did you have to apply, or were you, it was just your district,
Yeah,
or?
had to take a test.
Okay.
And bring a portfolio. So, which is a big deal when you're still in junior high school.
Yeah, I bet. That's crazy. It's like applying for a job.
Yeah, it really was.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
but it was a lovely experience.
Oh, wow, I bet. And so you entered what? So you went to school and you were trained as an illustrator, or in design, or?
Well, we got as
everything.
well-rounded a thing as we could get, because you did have to have your academics as well. You had to have your math and science and English and all that.
Okay.
But you had art periods that took you from like a foundation level to whatever major that you chose in your junior year. And for me, that was cartooning.
Okay.
And even though the school was definitely well set up to do animation, my teacher wasn't an animator.
Okay.
So I had to bring to it whatever I could, as well as listen to what he was telling me.
Wow.
And it was a pretty nice give and take. Now looking back on it,
That's fantastic. So, what was your first job?
my first job was with Seamus Culhane, who had worked on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and had done quite a bit of animation for Max Fleischer, among others. And at the time, he was doing commercials like everybody else in New York was back then. And I was an all-around everything. I was an in-betweener, an inker, a painter, and a gopher.
Is that because you were so young? And
Yes.
So you were the guy just because it's like.
So you and Jack Nicholson had the same job at one point, then,
So to speak.
Did you know about that?
At MGM?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I remember Ray Patterson, who was passed away now, a friend of mine that was on the original Tom and Jerry crew, had a drawing of Jack Nicholson as a production assistant on the Hanna-Barbera crew.
Wow.
As I recall, was he the one that... Was that the drawing where he's labeled Office Boy?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's Jack Nicholson.
I don't know who did that sketch. I can't
I don't know,
remember.
but it's totally recognizable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks like him.
There you go. You're welcome. Anybody else need anything? Doing good? Yeah.
Fine.
Good, thank you.
You want to take a break? If you can.
Yeah, we're going to take a little break.
Glad to see you're eating healthy now. Thing was. And now I can go find one online for $15. Mm-hmm. And it's a better camera. I'm actually kind of angry about it because now that they won't let me do 2D animation at the big studios, and I can do it. Oh well. Life goes on. So anyway, where were we?
Complaining about cameras. Commercial house.
Right. So you were working at commercial houses and you met Grim Natwick. So what kind of commercials were you doing at the time?
Oh, well, actually, no, I hadn't met Grimm.
Oh, not
Uh,
Grimm.
that-
Excuse me.
Oh, Seamus.
Seamus.
Yeah.
Sorry. I can't believe I said Grimm now. If you guys are listening to this, you can Google that if we don't cut out that big fat mistake I just made. Anyway, so you're working with Seamus and on commercial work. What kind of commercials were you working on at the time?
Oh, okay. Well, the very first one was for a what was then a new brand of coffee called Brim, and it was this was 1969, so it was very psychedelic,
Oh man.
very very Peter Max.
Did that happen when you drank the coffee?
No, I don't know. Maybe that's why it didn't last. I don't know, but okay. In any event. I'm trying to think now. I don't remember too much about the other commercials that I worked on. What I do remember is working for a fellow named T. Collins, who was the first black artist that I knew of to have a studio in New York. And he was a designer. He had been a designer back in the 50s for, I think, Academy Pictures, which at one time, if I remember correctly, was Bill Teitler's place. And
So this would have been after he'd been doing the Popeye cartoons.
yeah,
Yeah.
Bill Teitlow, Disney animator.
right.
Yeah, he did the Chernobog on Night on Bald Mountain. It's one of his biggest claims to fame. And Stromboli.
Right.
I don't remember what else. Dan
Oh,
does.
Dumbo.
Dumbo, yeah, I've heard of that. Isn't that just a cartoon? Anyway, you're saying?
But I did my first few Sesame Streets around that time. When I was working for T, I was doing ink and paint. I think I'm one of the last of the bunch who actually started in ink and paint. And
What is that?
Exactly. But you know, I'm pretty proud of that actually, because it did give me some skills that I was able to use for many years after.
I remember you telling me when I was learning how to draw after I'd gone to Cal Arts that Ooh, what? That to think of my pencil as a brush on vellum and to let it glide across.
Right.
And fortunately, I knew what a cell was because we were still doing some things in ink and paint then,
Yes.
the first few years. So I knew what you were
That's
talking
right.
about. It really wasn't until the mid-'90s that ink and paint really started to truly fade away.
Right.
I don't think on Swan Princess, I think everything was still done.
It was still selling.
Yeah, it was all cell. And they only did one or two shots, tested a couple of shots on Little Mermaid, right?
I think so.
They
Yeah,
did
just
digital.
yeah, some of the end stuff.
Yeah, the first digital was Rescuers down
Yeah.
there.
Boy, that looked weird. All that funky looking grain on the gray colors. But you could see the potential. I know a lot of people were like, oh no, it's ink and paint's gone away. And at the same time, what came back, because of the cost effectiveness, you could go back to having colored ink lines like on
Right.
Sleeping Beauty, but it changed the way people did cleanup.
Oh yes,
So that didn't
very
stay the
much.
same.
Yeah.
You know, people would take their rough drawings and then be given to a cleanup artist to do keys, and that line those rough sketches would be turned into a single line, and then an ink and paint artist would take that and ink it onto a clear piece of celluloid, which is why we call it cell animation. But when we started doing ink and paint on the computer, that aspect went away. We'd scan the cleanup drawings right into the computer, so those cleanup drawings themselves became more and more like ink drawings, and they had to be more accurate for that reason. So when you were doing the Sesame Street commercials, do you remember any of the spots that you did at the time? Was this now in the 70s?
This was early 70s, yeah. So one was called Nancy the Nanny Goat for the letter N. And
Remember that?
let me see.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah, you know that.
I was watching Sesame Street in the early 70s.
Oh my.
I won't tell you what year I was born when Dan Haskett went to high school. Anyway.
But and I can't remember the other one now. That's terrible. But I ended up doing some of my own several years later, and in the early '80s, I did 5 of them. And I just want to say a little bit about that because that was an experience that I haven't had the likes of since. It was so easy to get to make a film for the Children's Television Workshop, as it was called back then. Now I think it's Sesame Workshop. But there was only one person that you had to worry about. And you came in with your idea, whether it was in script form or storyboard form. And, that's right, before that, you were given a curriculum. You were given a list of subjects that they wanted to cover that year, that season. And so you were able to make your choice of what you wanted to do from that. And you brought in your idea in board form or script form. And this one lady, whose name was Edith Zorno, looked at it and said yes or no. And they gave you some money, and you left. And you went and you did it.
Wow.
Hopefully.
And then you brought it back. That was it.
Did you film it yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I hired folks to film it and do some of the ink and paint.
So these were all educational?
Yeah.
So when a cat
They were
can't,
like edutainment.
so when a cat can't open a can of tuna, what is the educational aspect? I love that cartoon.
Thank you. Yeah. They had some things were.
Here's how you doing there?
Good.
Very
Thank you.
Thank you.
Refill there?
No, I'm good.
All right.
Thanks.
Some things were conceptual, like that. They weren't. Everything wasn't English and math skills, but conceptual skills, just how to think, how to solve problems. So that's where that. I think most of the things, if not all of the things I did, fell into that category.
So that was your way of doing what you wanted.
Right.
You want some more soda water?
Sure, why not? Yeah. So after that, how long were you out in New York before you came out to California? Did you work there several more years, or?
Okay, well, I'll have to hop back in time again because I was actually directing at a studio that was called Teletactics. And that was basically it was a live action studio with an animation department that did low budget commercials and educational films and industrials, commercial film, corporate films. And I did things for the old Romper Room show. They were for Miles Laboratories, who made Alka-Seltzer and whatnot. And Procter & Gamble. Let's see, that's what the Romper Room stuff was for. It was Procter & Gamble. And we did several local commercials and things like that for grocery store chains and things like that.
They did animated local commercials?
Yes, sir.
Not anymore. I did one in college, but they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, it was another world. Yeah. It really was another world.
Because we also had a guy that dressed up like Dracula and showed horror movies on the weekends, and they don't do that anymore either.
But it was terrific. A wonderful place to cut your teeth, It was crazy making because the budgets were low and everything had to be done with a certain amount of speed. But
you did everything from
it
8 to 5, right? Every day. You never worked late.
Never had to tell you the truth, that is pretty much on the mark. Yeah. I think by the time I was about 25 years old, I said, I'm not going to work overtime anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Until you came out to California?
No, here's what happened. I was working on Raggedy Ann and Andy for Richard Williams, and we had a wonderful assistant animator, a career assistant named Jim Logan. who was a terrific cartoonist all around. And Jim was the kind of person you could set your watch by, because 5 o'clock he was out that door. Period. You know, that's it. And he would, good night, and he was out. He was gone. So I liked that. I liked the idea of that. So aside from other things I learned from Jim, that was a very important.
You mean you don't just like live on happiness and drawings and rainbows and
Everybody does
sparkles
that.
and cartoon
Apple
animals?
pie and Chevrolet. Well, I think to an extent, sure, I still do. I think we all do. We wouldn't be here doing it otherwise, because I don't think any of us drink. So we must be doing it for another reason.
Occasionally, but not to get a scene done.
But there are those two sides. There's the the lollipops and rainbows, and also the 5 o'clock. And it's good to have a healthy respect for both of them.
So how long, you'd been working in the business for what, 6 years, let's see, 7 years before Raggedy Ann and Andy, 6 years?
Let's see, yeah, 6.
I feel like that film's almost a lost movie. You know, it's not played much anymore.
Well, yes and no, because some wonderful person who was a Dick Williams fan put it up on YouTube. And
It's been making the rounds.
it's made the rounds. I don't know, maybe this may be something that I have to cut later, but
You didn't put it up there.
no, I didn't put it up there. That's true. But it is up there to be seen and appreciated, and I'm very glad that it has been. It's kind of amazing looking back on a lot of things that I've done, that to see them on YouTube and elsewhere and see these comments. Because when you're working on stuff, you go, oh my God, it's horrible. It's the worst nightmare I've ever had in my life. Whatever.
I've started to stop telling people what I thought of the films I've worked on, because I've had people over the course of the last 12 months specifically go, I grew up on that movie.
Yes.
You did that shot?
That's right.
Oh no. I'm going to shut my mouth.
Exactly. It's wonderful. It really is.
Well, I can tell you that when I saw Raggedy Ann and Andy, I wasn't little. I was little, but I wasn't 5. I think I was 8 when it came out, 7 or 8. And we'd gone to see a Charlie Brown feature. And then Raggedy Ann and Andy was coming on. They were doing double features. It was late at night. And I begged my mother to let me stay and watch this, because I saw some of the animation and I'd never seen anything like it. It was Disney-esque in its full animation and quality. Of course, looking back on it now, I can look at it and go, I can tell that, this scene was handled with care and this one was not.
Right.
Someone cared about this shot and nobody cared about this one. That being said, it was influential on my becoming an animator, because I sought out of it who animated that. Why does it look that way? Why does it look different than the Charlie Brown cartoon?
Right.
What is it about a Disney cartoon at the time that has some kind of spark of life in it that other cartoons don't? Is it just because of the budget? Well, yeah, that's a lot of it, but that's not the only reason. And you and I've had lots of conversations about that in the past. But what did you specifically do on Raggedy Ann and Andy?
I was a key assistant for Emery Hawkins, who was an animator, a golden age animator who had been just about everywhere, from Disney to UPA to Hubley's to Xander's in New York, Jack Xander's commercial studio.
Mm-hmm.
And he also had never worked on a feature up to that point. So this was very interesting.
Only shorts?
Right. So I had in shorts and commercials, and I had grown up on Emery's work, among, and several other people who worked on that movie. It was a once in a lifetime setup. It was done in two studios, one in New York, one in LA, and it had a who's who of animation talent, including Grim Natwick, Art Babbitt, Emery, Tisa David, Jerry Chinicki, Irv Spence, Willie Pyle, Jack Schnurk, for people from Paramount, Terry Toons, MGM, Disney, Warner Brothers, all of the majors, UPA, everybody was represented.
I wonder if that'll ever happen again with 2D.
I hope so.
I hate that term, 2D.
Well, let's
hand drawn.
Yeah, let's say hand drawn or traditional. Yeah.
And I do love both. Don't get me wrong. I've worked on both mediums, but frankly, there's something about the computer in your head having to figure out how to do it instead of the computer on your screen. The computer that you're sitting next to and inputting the data into.
But it's your first love. I mean, you just don't. It's very strange once with all the new animators who just never
drawn.
Never did the drawing.
Doesn't it blow your mind? Animators that have never drawn.
Amazing, yeah.
Well, I mean, but stop motion animators never drew either, but they're just as much animators. It's
Yeah.
just,
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because I'm thinking about the whole tactility thing. That it is amazing to me that people who have never drawn or never manipulated anything by hand are animating, and I do wonder if that does make a difference in the quality of the product, because I know for me personally, I feel like it does make a big difference, because the actual feeling the thing, touching the thing, is something that comes directly goes from your brain through your fingers directly. Big difference. Big difference, and it's that kind of I'll call it an almost intangible that people are not aware of. They don't seem to be aware of the importance of it.
yeah, maybe it's psychological because I mean because it's the same thing with a digital drawing versus drawing on paper. I mean, you're still doing it by hand, and it's still a drawing, but digitally, there's still a small disconnect as opposed to when you do it on actual.
The computer reinterprets what you're doing, and that's important. It does make a difference in the finished product.
Yeah.
That's one reason that I have trouble with Cintiqs. I may eventually work on one, but as long as it still gives its interpretation of my drawing, I'm not thrilled about it.
It's taken me 2 years to get used to drawing on my Cintiq, and I still draw better on a piece of paper. But the difference is, I can futz with that drawing a little bit on the Cintiq, and it saves me time because I don't have to scan it. Turn on the computer, scan it, get it in there, format it. So if I'm doing design work, if I'm animating, if I'm animating something on, hand drawn, I'm gonna use paper. I've tried it on the Cintiq. It's just not finessed enough. It's like drawing on a piece of glass.
Yeah.
Well, it's like drawing on a piece of glass with a Sharpie.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
That's what drawing on Cintiq feels like. But only depending on the program, the result looks like something out of a brush. So it's like three different things. So yeah, it's not even a Sharpie line; it's a brush line, but it feels like it's a Sharpie line.
Yeah.
It feels like you're drawing on glass with a Sharpie with a brush line at the end. So
Well, it's definitely not like drawn with a pencil and paper.
Not at all.
I wonder if it'll ever be. I think at some point they're just going to, well, you people with pencils and paper, just get used to it.
Well, they have. There are Cintiqs now with a rough
With the tooth on it.
tooth on it, and the Cintiq nibs are now felt tips, so it feels like a little bit more. You could feel the give now,
Yeah.
but still.
Well,
It's
the
a-
next
it's
time
a
I go
different
out and
thing.
spend $4,000, I'll make sure to go get that one.
Yeah. Oh my
Or
God.
should I just buy my paper for $20?
Hey, you might be able to take a little break.
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Thank you.
It'll give me
What are you
the
drawing?
Okay. For some reason, it's not. It doesn't. Okay. Anyway.
So after Raggedy Ann and Andy, Dan, did you stay in New York much longer? Did you decide to come out here? Or?
No, not much longer. No, just about 5 or so months later, I came out here for the first time to test the waters, and then moved out here that summer of '77, and went to Disney. And I think I have Dick Williams to thank for that. Actually, I think he had. I think he had dropped my name to Frank Thomas. And so, thank you very much.
Anything else today?
I'm good.
You guys okay?
Refills? Anything? No.
I'm good. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks. So I believe I do have him to thank for that.
And just, I mean, most people who are going to be listening know this, but just so they can put a face to the name, Richard Williams goes back to the 60s and 70s easily. One of the things he's probably most famous for doing that's still well known is he solidified the look of the current Pink Panther and did the interstitials for Return of did the title animation for Return of the Pink Panther, and then of course went on and did Raggedy Ann and Andy, lots of commercial work. I have several friends that have worked with him, and was the animation director on Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So when you started at Disney, what was it like? Who did you work with? What did you work on?
It was almost literally a 3-ring circus.
Walt was gone.
Walt was gone. Walt had been gone for a decade, and the place was trying to figure out what it was going to do. And as I understand it, there was a rumor at the time that they were going to close animation down. And so people who were very concerned about this were trying to figure out just what should the studio be doing, because another boot that they got was the success of Star Wars.
Huh.
Star Wars had just opened, I think, in May of that year. And I got to the studio in July. And so it was the talk of Hollywood.
Of course.
Wow. And Disney, like several other major studios, had passed on it when George Lucas came a-calling.
How ironic.
Yeah.
Now they own it.
Isn't it funny how things work out? You know? But yeah, so at the time, people were trying to figure out just what direction the studio was going to take, animation and otherwise, because also family films were on the skids too, because the 70s was the time of social realism. So that's what which of course made Star Wars a hard sell for Lucas in the first place. Mm-hmm. And Disney was split into 3 basic factions: was Walt's people, the Cal Arts people, the young folks who had just been brought in, some of them while they were still in school, to work there.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Brad would have been there at the time, right?
Mhm.
Brad Bird.
Yep. And then the Don Bluth faction.
Oh, right.
Now, Don had been at the studio in his teenage years, and then left for a while to do missionary work. and eventually he went through the TV mill, I think, over at Filmation, and then came back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he was in and out during that time.
Mm-hmm.
But he had his own idea with what to do, and he didn't feel that he could do it. I think he felt his wings had been clipped. So there you have it.
Dale has told me a little bit about that time period because
we have.
Dale was there a little bit before you were.
Yeah. We've got his story on this thing too.
That must be pretty good.
But
we will not talk about that. So.
but it's recorded. I mean,
yeah, but I think that's the part that might get clipped.
No, it's not. It's not. It's going to be in there.
Okay.
Dale didn't request that.
Okay. All right. Don't mention it again on the podcast.
And he not only that, but we asked him, and he's like, "No, leave it."
Remember, Dale, that's what they said. They said you said that.
It's recorded on the podcast.
Yeah.
He's saying, he's him saying.
So what was the? I want to jump back for a
Okay.
bit. Why did you get into animation? What is it that you've liked about it, thought about it? Why didn't you decide to make cars or pizzas or?
I had been drawing cartoons from the time I was 3. And that's why I tell people I didn't find it, it found me.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I was 10 or 11, I knew I wanted to do animation. And that's it. That's it.
I was in the same boat.
I loved cartooning, obviously still do. And there was something about bringing these things to life and being able to move an audience with these things. I mean, one of them, I think for me, one thing that was so much fun about cartooning in general was the reaction that people used to have to comic strip characters, newspaper strip characters, where they would actually get so involved with their adventures that they would forget almost that these were not real people. So that stuck with me. That's always been a driving force for me with animation.
You know, I have to say, I've met some people like that, Dan, that feel that way about animated characters, and they frighten me.
Well, I'm talking about.
But I know what you mean.
I'm talking about.
What I mean
every
a little
day.
different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember in the
anything
60s.
else? Any dessert or drink?
I'm good.
You good?
Tea, coffee, anything? All right?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks.
I remember in the 60s, the Dick Tracy strip, when Dick Tracy's son married a space alien called Moon Maid, and the newspaper was deluged with gifts and cards and well wishes.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we're not talking about people who make a living from that. I mean just average, everyday folks who just loved these characters so much. I mean, it's a similar thing. I remember there was a soap opera actress named Eileen Fulton, I think her name is, who was playing a villain in a very, very popular daytime soap opera. And she told the story of a woman walking up to her on the street and slapping her in the face.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, no.
And saying, you so-and-so, whatever. So, yeah.
Those are the people that I was talking about.
Okay. But, the idea of being able to move people with these drawings is very, very attractive. It's a very wonderful thing. And I sometimes wonder now if in the rush of the new technologies and people having to people getting used to those and spending a lot of time getting used to them because they change so much. If thank you. if something hasn't been lost. You know, if I wonder if people fully realize what they're able to do.
You know, I wonder, I know that there is a, for lack of a better term, I'll say this because we mentioned it earlier. It was not my, I mean, I like it, but it was not my bag. Star Wars. I think every generation has its Star Wars.
Yeah.
Mine wore a fedora and had a bullwhip, though. So I like Star Wars, but mine came a few years later. I wonder what it's like for people today. What is going to be the next Star Wars? And I don't mean that from a business standpoint. I mean that from a cultural standpoint. You know, what film is going to impact an audience, and they're going to carry it with them. You know, The Little Mermaid obviously is a big one, which you worked on, and you were a designer on as well.
Right.
Not, you know, a lot of people within the business know this, but you did a lot of the look and initial designs of Ariel, and even after Glenn Keane took that character and made it his own. I mean, you look at your original sketches and drawings, and you can tell where the development of that character came from. And the same thing with Belle from Beauty and the Beast. And that's a funny thing about hand-drawn animation, is when someone takes on someone else's work, it takes on their bent, it takes on that change, and there is a certain aspect of it that is communal artwork, kind of, in a way, in some instances.
You kind of riff on each other's work.
Yeah, which it's, it's not, if you're doing a comic strip, it's not so much, unless you're hired to take on, a comic strip and carry it forward after someone else is retired, or they share a strip or something like that. It's a little different. But do you think that there's a disconnect today? Do you think that films come and go more quickly? Not just from the standpoint of the way that they're released, which is true. A film gets in and out of the theaters much faster. I remember when Star Wars came out, and when Indiana Jones came out, they were in the theaters for months and months. Now, a film's a big hit, it's going to be in the theater for only a certain amount of time, no matter what, no matter if it's big or small. How do you think that affects how audiences pick up and become attached to characters in film?
Good question. I think that home video may have created its own niche that way, because now that people can actually buy a movie and hold on to it and watch it whenever they want to, if it's something that they really love, it may not have the cachet of an event like it used to, but there just may be the same kind of attachment now, or the same kind of sentiment, I'll say, for a movie that people you had with books.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly that. That it's a lot more like the book experience. But the thing is, a film requires a bigger budget, allows for a bigger budget, so you get a little bit more spectacle because of the budget. But the attachment that you were talking about that used to be given to comic strips are now done to serialized episodic television, which is no longer. I mean, it's not episodic, but serialized television, I should say, because it's a lot more like what used to be Moby Dick and Dickens and stuff like that, where it used to be serialized and then compiled into a big book. Well, that's what television has become in a lot of ways.
And it always was.
And comic strips were like a visual version of that for a while. And so because of on-demand digital stuff, it's no longer, you don't have to reboot the series every week. You could watch it all in one chunk.
Yeah, and now you can talk about it with people all over the world.
Yeah.
In an instant. So that's another factor that is something that we've never been able to do before. So it remains to be seen what kind of an effect that's also going to have.
What do you think the future is? I don't think I've asked this before. I'll ask Dan, because he's lived through so many of the various movements of animation in the new generation, including what is now called the New Golden Age. You know, kicking off with Roger Rabbit. As people look at that and say that kicked it off. I think it actually started a little before that. But what do you think the future of hand-drawn animation is, and specifically theatrical?
I think, okay, well, let me tell you a little story. Earlier this year, I went back to New York to give a talk at the School of Visual Arts, and I also went back to my high school, Art and Design. And my high school has been completely changed. The old building was knocked down and a new one built on the same site. And I spoke to the cartooning and animation class, who are now totally digital. And at one point I asked them, how many of you would like to do traditional, you know, to do hand-drawn animation? How many of you are interested in doing that? Most of them raised their hands. And that was a lovely surprise. Because here's this room full of 17-year-olds who have never known life without digital. And they're curious. So I think that the future of this really depends on how many people who do love it are willing to work from that love and just ignore what else is going on and just say, well, this is what I love, this is what I want to do. Because you need to just focus on what you enjoy, what really fires you up. And I think once you do that, other things will start to fall into place. You'll start wanting to do better stories. You'll start wanting to create characters that have an effect on people. You'll want to communicate rather than just sell toys. And I've run into enough young people, enough students who really would like to give this, you know, at least take a crack at this. And that's just marvelous to me. If they pull together, you know, and now that they actually have, with the technology, one of the things that they can use it for is to support each other.
You know, I think the other side of that coin, and this is something that has always lamented me, and I've told you this before, and I'll mention this briefly, that I always, you know, it frustrated me going to the water cooler, so to speak, and hearing, not that everybody complained about everything, that's not the case, but going to the water cooler and hearing, oh, this film's terrible, or oh, this is how they should do this, they should run this is where the problems are, they should run it this way, and very few of those people that were talking in that way have the guts to put their money where their mouth was and start a business. I wish that in the artistic and film community that Business 101 was a requirement before you could graduate.
Yeah.
That is the one thing I wish was different. Because it's empowering. If people know how to run a business, it empowers them to be able to do it.
Yeah, and you might suggest that that young artists do exactly that. If their schools don't offer it, to take a course elsewhere, you know, or you know, pick up a book, or order an e-book, you know, and do it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, okay. To jump back, I don't know how much longer you've got, but we'll try to
I got a little bit.
Okay. Well, to jump back in time again, back at Disney. So, what was it? What was the first project you worked on there, and what were some of the projects that you enjoyed and had a real influence on?
Okay, the first project was called The Small One, and it was a Christmas half hour. That I think is, probably maybe it still comes out on home video at Christmas time. I don't know.
Did Bluth direct that?
Did he direct that? Yes. Yes, that was yeah, that was his thing. Yeah. The second one was The Fox and the Hound, and after that, I left the studio during that and came back 10 years later for Little Mermaid.
Wow. And when you started on The Little Mermaid, what were you brought in to do?
Character design.
Character design?
Yeah.
So you were designing Ariel,
Right.
and did you touch every character? Just some of
Yeah.
the characters? Touched every character?
That's a common thing with designers, or a common thing with development artists, or just to touch everything, or was it just unique to the position or that time?
Depends. It's flexible. It's completely flexible. It just really depends on where you are and what the film is at the moment. Really, because some things you'll be designing all the characters. Others you'll be brought in as a specialist. For sometimes some things I've been brought in on because I do ethnic characters. But it's its character design has been a very informal, like a lot of other things in animation. It's been very informal because your characters have been designed by story artists, by directors, by animators, and by specialists. So,
If you were to advise anybody, because that's really interesting. It just occurred to me. If you were advised to any advice to a student who wants to get into the animation industry, or is working already, what would be something that you would say to them now, as opposed to before? Like, how has conditions changed?
I don't think conditions have changed that much.
Okay.
I would still say live, get out and meet people, learn from people, travel, build yourself up culturally. The thing that I fear is because of the emphasis on the technology, and that technology is changing constantly. I'm concerned that there will never be a quiet time. That's what worries me, is that there won't be a time for people to just sit back and really feel and think about what they do.
You think it's because there's so much media is absorbed all
So
the time?
much media is absorbed, and also the constant having to relearn, having to learn new software again and again and again. That's got to be taking away from people's just your ability to concentrate.
I agree with you, but I recall my dad was a fireman. And he told me, he said, son, you got to go to school every 5 years. You're going to go back to school. And you're at your job, you're going to end up going back to school. Even if it's at your job, you're going to be learning something, because things are going to change. How you do things. And I didn't really click with me until several years ago. As I've been working in the film industry, how that really is true within our industry, of course, because of the technology is generally, it has to be the cutting edge to be able to bring it to the media. So of course we're going to get hit hardest in a way, but every job. Remember we did a podcast a while back saying don't stop learning. So there is that aspect, but I know what you mean. You have to
But,
learn the
yeah.
software just to be able to draw a character,
But
just to be
what
able
I
to manipulate or make the movie. You have to learn this new software.
what it seems to me that you're saying, Dan, is not. It's not that you shouldn't be learning so much as you should learn to be without necessarily being connected, without necessarily being distracted from just contemplating who you are, where you are at, and just be able to be quiet mentally in your mind and in your and then
Yeah.
deal with life, the fact that you're alive and you're living, and maybe even contemplate the scary stuff that you're trying to distract yourself from by being online all the time or checking your email or yeah.
A friend of mine has a daughter who I think is 2 years old, 2 or 3 years old. And he documents her adventures in cartoon form. It's the best thing he's ever done. It's absolutely marvelous. And yeah, that's what I mean is what I'm seeing with a lot of what I've always seen with animation artists is more and more they seem to be getting away from actually feeling anything about what they're doing.
Okay.
Almost like pulling it out of a hat. Here's my bag of tricks. I'll walk in. I'll do. Not that everybody does this, but there could be an aspect. I know there is for me sometimes. You know, you get a dry spell, but you still got to pay rent.
Yeah, and you do have to use your bag of tricks. That's true. What I mean is, though, that it seems that even people just coming into the field, people going into it now, don't really get the value of feeling. They're very hung up on how things look, and making sure that they have the latest style down pat. They're very, very much concerned with what other artists think of them, which is, I mean, of course, is what young people will do anyway. But the advent of things like Deviant Art and Tumblr and other websites where artists are comparing each other so early is worrisome, I think.
Well, I think that also can spawn. It can be good and it can be bad.
Yeah.
The good is you can get your stuff out there immediately.
Right.
You can self-publish.
Right.
The bad, you're immediately comparing yourselves to people that have 25 years of experience.
Well, you're immediately and you're constantly comparing.
Yeah. And then you can also turn that into a feeding off. Well, that's how they draw. I learn how to draw the way they draw. And then my stuff starts looking like their stuff, and I don't go out and ever just draw from life. I don't ever soak it in. I'm constantly drawing something based on someone else's something that's based on someone else's something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there's no joy in that. And I do wonder when I talk to students, they're very, very nervous. And it goes beyond just the thing of being young and inexperienced. There's something sinister. There's something that feels sinister to me that's at work that is leading them away from themselves. It's taking them away from finding out what kind of people they are artistically. I don't put myself in the position to hear it, but I don't know if there's a lot of discussion about the art side of anything with this anymore. I don't know. I had friends who were dying to have something like some equivalent of a La Belle Epoque setup where they would be in cafes talking about art and with a capital A, and politics and events of the day.
I think that's always been missing from Los Angeles.
Yeah. Maybe not.
To-
Maybe so. Maybe not always, but I think I
To a
think
degree.
it disappeared. Yeah.
Because we're on our cars, it's not a small
Yeah.
town. Everything's spread out.
Yeah.
So
It does make a big difference. It really does.
so again, on the flip side, there is that aspect though digitally.
Mm.
You can go to forums and you can have discussions.
You can, and that does help. What
But it's
I've
not
also
tactile.
heard, yes, what I've also been hearing from people who have been, brought up on that, is that they don't. Okay. Uh, Again, when I was in New York recently, I was talking to the two ladies who run Asifa East. And at the time, they were upset because they were not able to get people away from their computers to come out to any events.
Oh my gosh.
Everybody was working so hard, and they were so involved with, making deadlines or, otherwise getting their stuff done, that they, they wouldn't leave. they didn't come outside.
Well,
and since then, fortunately, it looks like it is changing. So
Okay.
that's good.
well, but that's not actually the fault of the technology. It's more of the fault of the curriculum, right? Or no?
I think that the technology has, as Larry was saying, it has its good points as well. But I think that the bad points have been overlooked to a degree. Because again, it's so new and people are so interested, and there's this big rush, and there's a big push to embrace it as well. And I think that people forget. It comes back to bite them, eventually. But I do think that people forget. And with animators especially, they've been prey for a long time to what I used to call the 12-field mentality, which is you're involved in this little square right in front of your face for 8 hours a day. And another curious thing I've been seeing lately is people really not talking to each other. And I'm guilty of that myself. That they're not hanging out around the water cooler anymore.
Well, I know in part at my studio, part of that is just deadlines have gotten crazy,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and
They've-
the
no,
show's
they've
much more
gotten-
complicated, so it's a little bit trickier.
Well, yeah, the deadlines are insane because people have no idea of how long it takes to do anything, and they don't ask, and they don't care.
I think, yeah, they don't ask because they don't care. They just want it.
Well, and also people don't tell them how long it takes.
Yeah.
I think people are afraid to tell them how long it takes. And that's very sad. But the upside again to all this is, I think, that if you get enough people together who feel a certain way, that they can create something new. I'm not even talking about turning the tide anymore. I'm just thinking about throwing out the whole thing and starting from scratch. The technology is here and it's not going to go away. And you have to figure out how to use it the best way.
Well, now that you can self-publish,
Mm-hmm.
you know, if you've got the desire and the time to do a cartoon and the resources, whether that's money or friends or just your own time on your own, you can do something and get it out there.
Right.
And that's unique. It's never been like that before.
No, no, it's changed everything. It's changed how things are made, distributed, and marketed. It's changed the whole ball
Yeah,
game.
it's
top to
empowered.
bottom.
It's
Yeah.
empowered the individual more than anything else.
Yeah.
I would add to that actually. I would ask, don't you think that's already that is kind of happening already? Like the whole throwing everything out and starting over. It's kind of what's already happening. It's going to be almost like a generation or 2 or 10, 20 years. It's like, for example, 2D may come back again full throttle, but it'll be reinvented by a completely different generation who didn't work within the parameters of the old generation, and
Yeah.
because they've reinvented how to do it, or reinvented at least the structural way to produce it, not necessarily the art form in and of itself, but the way it's produced,
Right.
because CG has taken over, and
Yes.
2D is technically is dead as far as the commercial,
Feature.
the feature animated, feature
For now.
animated movies.
Yeah.
2D is still alive and well in television, and people are animating on individually, but at least in the U.S., because in Japan there's 2D feature, and in Europe there's 2D feature, but in the U.S. it's kind of.
Well, remember too, it's this way because we let it happen. We just let it happen.
And we were told, you know, there's no studio head that's come up and said, I want to be a filmmaker. No, they for the most part, movie studios are not run by movie makers. You know, and not that
Yeah.
there's always been that aspect, of course. There's always, you
Yeah.
know, but I'll just be specific. In Walt Disney's case, here was a guy who wanted to do art, who wanted to be a storyteller and an animator, and his studio came out of that love and enjoyment, and of course it's affected the whole fabric of entertainment.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
we don't have that aspect to that degree today, as far as someone coming in and having a big venue with a big studio that's putting product
Well,
like
yeah.
that out there
yeah, yet.
yet.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
because now you've got the ability to self-distribute, you finish something, put it up on YouTube, you get a hit immediately. You know, you can go directly to Netflix, you can go directly to Hulu. Now, what's going to happen is these companies are going to be bought by the big guys eventually, but that isn't going to make all the other outlets go away. Something
Right.
else is going to pop up
Right.
in its place.
Yeah.
And I can tell you from, you know, my personal film, what I'm working on right now, you know, yes, we're doing CGI, but I'm going to do the end credits 2D. You know, why not do both? Not just one, but have both in there and see what happens. They're two very different animals, although there's a lot of like thinking between the two. You know, 2D and or hand-drawn and computer-generated animation are very different animals. Now, my experience has been from the standpoint of those two aspects, that traditional animators who really took to doing computer animation, their work generally, there's something that's just a little different in their work than someone who has come up and only done computer generated animation, has never touched tactile, has never, you know, taken life drawing, has never, you know, sat down and figured out how to draw the head in different human head in different angles. There's something different about it.
Yeah.
And there's a quality that is different. I won't say it's better, because there are some fantastic digital animators out there, but there is something different about it. So likewise, going back to the whole business comment, you look at the medium of animation as a whole, both digital and traditional, and the ability to put your own stuff out there. Those two things have never been a part of anyone's world until this generation. It's never happened before. You have to go to the gatekeeper at the newspaper if you wanted to get your cartoon published. Otherwise, no one is ever going to see it, because way back when you couldn't even copy it. It was, here's my original, and no one else is ever going to see it, because there was no such thing as a Xerox machine. You didn't have a camera at home that you could take a picture of, much less being able to scan something or take a picture of it and immediately send it out to some post board where thousands of people could immediately see it 30 seconds after you put it into your computer.
Right. And
So Dan, where's your studio?
Well, I have a couple of folks who are after me right now to do just that, and also I am finally putting together my artwork for a book.
Finally, you want some of the originals back? I've got a stack about that at home.
I've got about 40 years worth in storage,
Wow.
so yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, I think it is finally going to happen, and I'm very happy about it.
So we'll wrap it up here in a moment. After Disney, you worked on Beauty and the Beast and Little Mermaid. I met you at Warner Brothers before Beauty and the Beast, wasn't it? Yeah, because I started at Disney on Prince and the Pauper.
It was around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Warners, I have a big folder of just your Tiny Toons stuff.
So do I.
It's like this thick.
Oh my goodness.
Just a big monster of just Tiny Toons, Dan Haskett.
But I was
Tiny
there when he
Toons
was drawing it.
artwork. Yeah, I got a photocopy, right?
So you went on, you get really influential on Tiny Toons and the whole rebirth of Warner Brothers Animation. You were highly influential on. What have you been doing lately? What stuff have you been working on? What have you been enjoying working on? What's coming up that you can mention?
Well, I'm actually back at Warner Brothers. I've been there for about 4 years now, 4 or 5, almost 5. And I've been working on Scooby-Doo and Tom and Jerry. Ironically enough, I'm one of the last people there working on paper. And I'm also one of the last people there to be animating traditionally.
Wow.
Happily, I have a wonderful director who is an animator himself and who just adores animating. So I get the chance, and other character layout people get the chance to actually animate scenes now.
I did a
in the
few.
middle of all this, of what we've been talking about.
Yeah. I worked on a couple
Here
of
we
those
are.
Tom and Jerry's.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, anything you want to tell
Of the
anybody
new,
before?
of the new, the stuff
Yeah.
that he's working on?
I worked on the Robin Hood one, and I worked on what was the other one I did? What was the one before that? Before the Robin Hood, Tom and Jerry. 'Cause I did
Wizard
I
of
did some
Oz?
yeah, Wizard of Oz. That's what it was. Because I did some Tuffy on that. I did some Tuffy, and then on the Tom and Jerry meet Robin Hood, I did Jerry and Spike, some Spike, which is funny because Ray Patterson, whenever there was Spike to do, Ray Patterson would do Spike. He was always given the Spike animation. Anyway, any other suggestions for your fans? Anything you want to say to animation fans or wannabe professionals or those who are coming up through the ranks that you haven't already said?
I would just say, just remember to love it. And if you ever run into anything that makes you doubt that you love it,
Give you a call?
555.
Sorry.
I would just say to, if it's not fun anymore, then let it go. You know? Find something
Not
else
immediately. Like if you have a couple of days.
I'm just saying that just make sure that you enjoy yourself with this, you know, as much as you possibly can. Don't let yourself get snowed under by all of the rigmarole that goes on with the business. And I know it's very difficult, but it is doable.
Thank you, Dan, for coming and talking with us. And this is, like, we didn't even talk about, like,
We could easily do two
we
more.
could do like 2 or 3 more.
Same thing with Dale's
It's
interviews.
amazing. I'm kind of glad we didn't even talk about Simpsons. We didn't. There's just so much. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for being. I'm starting to gush. Thank you so much.
Do you want me to close this out?
Yes, please.
I know Dan longer, and I know all some of his faults and stuff. He's really not that good. I'm lying. I'm jealous. Anyway, Dan, again, thanks for coming out and visiting with us, and for recording another episode of the Corner Booth with us. And for everybody who's listening, we'll see you next time at the Corner Booth.
But we shouldn't talk about our site.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for listening to the Corner Booth again. If you'd like to visit us, you can see us on
cornerbooth.net
or
iTunes
or
I don't know.
Facebook. Don't forget to go to Facebook and like us. We will continue to post articles and stories about animation. Again, thank you, Dan Haskett, for joining us. We really appreciate you spending time with us.
Do you have then a website or anywhere that you
Not
could?
yet. I'm setting up a Facebook page, though.
Okay. Okay, good.
If you'll do another interview, I'll help you.
And Larry, do you have anywhere you could be reached online?
Yes, you can check out Ghost Train Pictures, and of course you can see my personal stuff on LarryWhitakerProductions.com, but Ghost Train Pictures on Facebook, and soon we'll have our Ghost Train Pictures website up. So until next time, release the drawing website.
Yeah, you could. I have the
Do visit
drawingwebsite.com. You can go to that one. You can go to LuisEscobarblog.com. You can go to the Drawfu group on Facebook. You can join us there. And I'm Twitter. I'm Luis _E_Escobar on Twitter. And I'm also on Google Plus.
Oh,
and I have a Facebook page.
And
also.
if you do visit us on Facebook, we will reply until we have 25,000 fans. That's where we're going to cut it off at. So, until next time, we'll see you at
The Corner